Listen up, fellow babies. It's time for another season-ending episode of Hold My Order, Terrible Dresser, the deep dive history nerd WKRP in Cincinnati podcast. I'm Mike Grasso. With me, as always, is Rob McDougall. Rob, good to see you tonight.
Good to see you, Mike. Happy season 3.
Yeah, it's I've been thinking a lot about this season the last couple days as we got ready to do this season wrap-up, and I have a lot of thoughts on where we stand now that we're 3/4 of the way through WKRP.
It's true, we're over the hump now, and boy, oh boy, yeah, the end is in sight. We'll worry about that next season, I guess, but this season has been it's been a heck of a ride.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. Both in WKRP's 1980-81 and in our 2016-17. But we'll get to that.
I've got him. What the hell is going on?
Who is that?
Andy!
Where have you been? Looking for a bulb in Dayton. What the hell's going on?
Mickey's a man and I kissed him on the lips. Mickey's a poisoner who shoots people.
What? Why are we talking this way in the dark?
What's that?
It's music.
It's Mickey's music. He always plays it when he's unhappy.
Mickey? Mickey?
Yes, Andy?
Are you there?
Yes, I am. Andy, do you gentlemen always tumble around in the dark before a big meeting? Mickey? May I ask a question? Go ahead, Art.
Are you going to kill us? Who are you?
I'm Vicky Von Vicky. Who are you? And why are you praying in the dark?
Why don't we start off this season wrap-up episode like we usually do and talk about our 3 favorite episodes of the season and our least favorite episode of the season.
Sounds good. This is a funny season, kind of. It started out sort of all over the place.
Yeah.
Different tones, some great episodes, some weak episodes. Season 1, they were figuring out what the hell they were doing. Season 2, I think we thought was much more consistent.
Consistent, yes.
That was our watchword. And this season, yeah, it has the kind of, throw everything at the wall, see what sticks first half, and then the kind of gloomier second half. So do we do best episodes first or worst episodes
why
first?
don't we start with let's start with our worst episode of the season.
We don't need to belabor it.
We did a bottom 3 in the first season, and I just don't think I could handle a bottom 3 tonight. So
that's no fun kicking them when they're down.
So here's the interesting thing. Okay, so I did a little spreadsheet today, Rob, where I took all of the episodes from the last 3 seasons of WKRP and kind of put them into 3 categories: great, middling, and bad. I just figured, don't go into granularities. What score does it get? 10 out of 10?
Because that would be weird and obsessive.
Exactly. This is a very easy spreadsheet to do. There's no functions I have to do or anything like that. So it's worked out pretty well.
I keep thinking that we should do some kind of a WKRP bracket. Or not bracket.
I was thinking about that.
Or not a bracket, but a draft. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I was thinking we could easily do a bracket of top 8 or top 16 episodes.
We could. Maybe that's what we do at the end of season 4. 4 seasons. It works well for brackets,
Yes. We could have 4 regions, 1 for each season, and see how they all go up against each other.
Ooh, okay, it's a date.
Okay, we'll keep that in mind and we'll put a pin in it. But so what I did with this spreadsheet is I split up all of the episodes of WKRP, all the 3 seasons we've done so far, into great, middling, and bad episodes. So, great. These are the episodes I would want to rewatch, right now. I would sit down with a bowl of popcorn.
Was it roughly equal, those piles?
Well, that's what I wanted to talk about. Yeah, because season 3, as you say, started off kind of weird and strange, and didn't seem like it had the sort of hitting power of season 2 and the consistency that you were talking about. But what I found out once I got past those first few episodes is actually this season has a very similar spread of episodes, at least in my spreadsheet, to season 2. There's 5 5 or 6 great episodes in my mind. And then, a good chunk of middling ones that I would watch if they were on TV. And then there's only a few very, very bad ones, actually. And so I didn't have a lot to choose from my worst. I basically got it down to Airplane Show, Mile in My Shoes, Until Death Do Us Part.
Yeah, that's my 3 also. We are simpatico, and yes, those are the clear. Basically, it gives you the choice of
strike hit gimmick episode, right?
Yeah, right. The sort of gimmick episode where which I wouldn't pick as my worst, as painful as it is to watch, because you
it's
got
that Who song in it. I mean, it's already good there,
and you got to give them an A for effort. Like they were trying. They were trying.
They were fighting with one hand tied behind their back in that one, definitely.
Yeah. And then Till Death Do Us Part, I think is, had casting issues and was sort of a bland tonal misfire. That's what I would say.
Yeah. So it's Mile in My Shoes, right? I mean, that's it.
It's Mile in My Shoes because it, of course, even before the final 10 seconds, even before it gets the automatic blackface DQ.
Yeah.
It's just
I'm picturing the Family Feud X coming over the screen,
even before it pulls that one. Yeah, it's just a shabby episode. Like it's just poorly
done. There's nothing good about it. It's just like Young Master Carlson. There's nothing to commend it.
Yeah. So that's really that was my pick, and I'm not at all surprised that it was yours.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get to the positives. I had a lot of trouble with this. I had way more trouble with this than I did with season 2. Like I have these top 6 episodes. I'm just going to read them off real quick. Real Families, The Baby, Hotel Ocean View, Frog Story, Venus and the Man, and Cleanup Radio Everywhere.
Yes, so that's a great list.
Those 6 were what I had to narrow down. So
not Dr. Fever and Mr. Tide?
I put it in the middling because of the first half being so slow.
Yeah.
It's a great episode. I really enjoyed going over it with you and Jeff, but yeah, it's not at the level of those other ones. And so, with those 6 episodes, I mean, where do you even start? Like, I love them all for so many different reasons. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. I found this, very difficult to pick a top 3, let alone a top 1. You're right. This, I don't know, something about the ordering of the season made it feel, and the things that are going on outside of the show.
Yeah.
Maybe made it feel rougher than it was, because when you line them up, I'm not surprised by what you say about your spreadsheet. There's some, there's some great episodes. In season 3.
And honestly, even middling ones, like we got so much more out of the painting and sort of some of these other middling ones that I would have thought. Like I when we talked about them, we brought out, I think, a lot more in them.
Painting, I would say Secrets of Dayton Heights has some, is the 2 that we did with our moms. Of course, it was so fun to have our moms on the show, but the 2 episodes I thought were really fun and interesting in different ways.
Baby It's Cold Inside was, again, that was kind of like a revelation as well. Yeah. But let me get to my top 3. So,
okay.
My third favorite episode in this season is Frog Story. It's not my favorite. There are others that I like better, but Frog Story was my number 3. I'm going to go through all of mine. You can go through yours. Yeah. Number 2 was Cleanup Radio Everywhere.
I
had a lot of trouble deciding on how the 1-2 were going to go. My number 1 is actually Hotel Ocean View.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I just think it's the most comedically perfect episode of WKRP. It feels, again, like a 90s or an aughts sitcom episode. Sure, there's the retrograde trans stuff, but that was kind of redeemed, again, by what we saw Linda Carlson put into this character. But it just makes me laugh. I think about Gordon Jump and Larry Hankin, and I just start smiling to myself, Yeah. And so that's my top episode of the season. Now, The Baby and Real Families, oh man, I really wish I could put those in top 3. They're just all really good. Those 6 I named are just really good episodes.
Yes, sure. Yeah, I mean, even just while you were talking, I was trying to make revisions to my list because it's so hard. It's so hard. So I don't know. I'm going to say, just going with what I put down.
Yeah.
I put Real Families at number 3.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I had to be on the list because it's just so clever and inventive.
Yeah.
But
I think the reason why it didn't go top 3 for me is because it is kind of awkward, and as you know, I'm not a big fan of the awkward.
You don't like the awkward, but it kills me not to have Cleanup Radio Everywhere on the list because I think it deserves to be there. It kills me not to have Venus and the Man on my top 3
I
list.
I know.
But so I went. What did I just say? Real Families.
Yep, 3.
I said Hotel Ocean View was my number 2.
2?
And it could absolutely be number 1, but I do have this emotional fondness for Frog Story, and it's at the top of the list. I understand it's not, there aren't as many sort of fireworks to it, but that's kind of what I like about it. It's sort of like God talks to Johnny with the sort of the minimalist, the cheapest ass prop in the world, just a cardboard box and
with a rubber frog in it,
a fleeting second of a frog, which they didn't even paint pink. It tells this marvelous little story, and it's probably my favorite of the Let's Humanize Herb episodes.
Oh, sure, and, of which there are a lot in seasons 2 and 3. Yeah.
And I've said before that I just always thought of Frog Story and Fish Story as a marvelous pair showing the different ways that WKRP can go.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry, guys. I don't know what to do.
You must. You've got to.
Look, Herb, in medical school, all we ever did to frogs was cut them up. We never tried to save one. Let's go talk to the receptionist. Look, Herb, I don't know how to say this to you, but I really think that somebody should.
What?
It's just a frog.
And you call yourself a doctor? It's more than a frog, it's Greenpeace.
People and their pets.
Yeah.
What we wanted to do kind of after talking about the WKRP episodes, I thought it would be a good kind of switch up to talk about our favorite podcast episodes of the season. Because I've been listening to a lot of the season 3s leading up to this podcast because I wanted to kind of refresh my memory. And first of all, let's thank all of our guests. I mean,
absolutely. That's the only problem with picking favorites is how can we choose between our guests? We've had we always have great guests, but we've had terrific guests this season.
I mean, first of all, Leah Beal, who went above and beyond the Call of Duty in her special guest host spot.
I know. And we made 4 episodes out of that one guest spot. We could have kept talking to Leah for another 3 hours. She's terrific. And
Leah, if I'm ever able to clone myself, I will do the classic game show podcast with you anytime, anytime. We should thank Mandy Leach, who brought a lot of gravitas to our episode about Frog Story and Venus and the Man. Again, what a miracle that somebody who's been involved in teaching and eco-pedagogy and all the other stuff that she's been into had those 2 episodes to talk about.
Yeah, and I think that just ended up being a wonderful episode. I don't want to toot our horn, but Mandy made it. People actually commented to us that they found that episode sort of inspiring, and
that's what I wanted
I think
to say.
It was. Yeah.
Lately, it's been rough, and I did re-listen to that episode today and over the last couple of days actually, and it's actually really, really helped out a lot. I mean, the blog post I did, the Monday post I did for that episode right after the election. Yeah, I mean that episode's always going to remind me of having hope. So.
Yeah, well, our fan favorite, our favorite, there's nobody funnier, there's nobody who can crack us up more than our buddy Jeff Wickstrom. And,
yes. Aren't you excited to be role-playing with him in a couple of weeks? Isn't that going to be great?
I don't know. Is that going to work, doing a horror game with Jeff? No, I mean, ever since, he's one of those guys who just, his mind, just the way his mind works, I am always surprised and impressed, and I just, I want my brain to do what he can do. When I read his writing,
yes.
When I hear what he has to say about things, the way he thinks, he's, how to put it, I just feel like he's sort of 45 degrees off from everybody else, and I mean that in the best possible way, that he just kind of everything sort of bounces off him askew with he puts a little spin on everything, a little English on everything, and just so he's a delight to talk to.
Yeah. And then finally, geez, I mean,
yeah, well, a boy loves his mother, and what was how great was it to have my mom and your mom for our mid-October Christmas episode. He has Genghis Khan for a mother.
I really, really want to release at some point that 8 minutes of them talking about them acting really, really badly in college as teenagers.
The suppressed 8 minutes of our mom's confessions. Yeah.
Very, very Nixon-esque, isn't it? But yeah, like, here's the thing, we've talked a lot about sort of our lives in the rec room, right? Like our childhoods in front of TV. And I think one of the things that I kind of always elide or kind of ignore is the fact that I joke around about being raised by TV, but, my parents did know what I was watching. Like they couldn't help it because I talked about TV so much when I was a little kid.
Mom.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you want to hear my theory about WKRP?
Well, I've talked about it with my grandmother too, watching like Doctor Who with her on weeknights while, waiting for my mom to get home from late nights at work. And like, the TV was actually part of the family. It wasn't one of these things where it was, on in the background. Like it was actually something we watched together as well. And so, having my mom on to talk about this sitcom from an era, this sitcom was on when she was in her, 30s, basically, late 20s, early 30s. I mean, what were the sitcoms that were on in your late 20s, early 30s, Rob? I mean, that's like Seinfeld and stuff, right? Like she's able to talk about it and remember it while it was on. And it was just really fun to kind of talk to them, not just about our childhoods and all the little in-jokes, but just talk to them about like TV and stuff. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. I thought they were both naturals. I think they should do a podcast or,
they totally should. Yes.
So often, I think about this about many older people I know that they're great raconteurs, they're great storytellers, and that's when you actually have some material to talk about, some stories to tell,
Yes,
and you don't just have to talk about old TV shows. When you've lived a little.
Yes, exactly.
But no, that was wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, are there any episodes that didn't have guests that really stand out for you? Episodes of the podcast of Hold My Order?
I feel like it'll just sound like us praising ourselves if we sort of.
We should do it a little bit. We're 3 seasons in at this point, Rob. Let's pat ourselves on the back a tiny bit.
Okay, well, let me think about it. What are the ones that sort of jump out from this season? I mean, one we get into. This takes us into talking about the arc of the season because I think that the ones that are memorable, Lady from Chicago is memorable because it's right after the election, and you can
Lady
hear that
from
in
Chicago
her voices.
It's probably my favorite Rob and Mike episode of the season. Yeah, it was needed at that point, and I think we did a great job. I mean, seeing the similarities between Ask Jennifer and I Am Woman was actually kind of interesting. Looking at Jennifer and Bailey and how they kind of interact with the rest of the crew at the station and seeing how they react to stuff happening in the world that's very serious. Like it was a good pair of episodes and we got a lot out of them. And I guess Imagine There's No Heaven, the last episode of the season also. I mean, again, listening to that last half that's about Clean Up Radio Everywhere is just super pertinent,
Yeah, well, these are documents of where we were at, just days after the election, and then where we were at in early 2017, and that's going to be. Who knows what the future will hold, but it's nice to have those records, even if those weren't fun moments,
Hey guys, at it again.
I'd also like to say, too, that often my editorials are written by Bailey Quarters. Bailey Quarters is a woman. Although I have known 2 Baileys that were men. Anyhow, Bailey is the head of our Save the Flim Building campaign, and I want you to send your petitions and cards, letters, and remarks to her. Architecture not only reflects our times, it is the art of our times. I'd also like to submit that progress is not always a wonderful thing. To tell you the truth, recently, I haven't been too hot on progress. Those big, new glass buildings make me uncomfortable. Can't even get a comfortable chair in one of those places. Of course, I could be wrong because oftentimes I really don't know what I'm talking about. This is Arthur Carlson speaking. What do we do now?
Well, I guess we'll just, have some fun saving a building.
It is fun, isn't it?
That preceding moment of silence was presented as a service to the hearing impaired listeners of ours. And this is Venus again, and I'd just like to say I'll be glad when all these white folks go home.
Well, so what we figured we'd do with our sort of viewer mail segment or listener mail segment this time around is kind of do a lightning round and just kind of hit some of the these are going to come from all over the place. We've gotten a lot of emails this season. We've gotten a lot of Twitter traffic and some Facebook comments as well on our sort of show posts. So,
and it bears repeating. You hear it from podcasters all the time, but we love getting your comments. We love getting your emails. We love getting, the whole game is set up so that what rewards us, what rewards the podcast, what gets other people, exposes other people to the podcast is, liking it on iTunes, reviewing it anywhere, but especially reviewing it on iTunes and Stitcher and giving us stars, giving us clicks. But then, the real reason we do it, we love to hear from people. And so the conversations that we have, and the comments that we get on the website, on all the various social media channels, it's terrific. And I do feel like, Mike and I don't obsess about the numbers, but the numbers are healthy and they're growing, and we got a lot of, I think we probably have too much mail for us to really do justice to it all this time around, which is new. And,
it is. I mean, I was just doing a quick little count and scrolling through all these, but between Twitter, Facebook, and, the big guy at holdmyorderterribledresser.com, we've probably got like a couple dozen like things we could go through tonight, Yeah. So
if we don't get to all of your questions, our apologies. We'll certainly,
I know it's amazing.
hit us up on social media and we'll talk there. We're always happy to talk about WKRP, but we'll just kind of roll through a couple of these and see. And some of them, I have to admit, stumped me too. We got a couple of questions that I just don't know the answer to.
Yeah. So do you want to do this lightning round style? We'll each pick one off the list and basically just talk about it, and we can throw it to the other person.
Sounds good.
Okay. I wanted to start with Dominic Lloyd. He sent a really interesting email, first of all, about growing up in Whitehorse, Yukon, which just... I have a strange obsession with like Arctic and subarctic, like really distant, towns and stuff like that. Like, so the idea of somebody growing up and watching WKRP on Whitehorse TV just completely blows my mind. So he told us a little bit about, watching it in the same period we did, Rob, early to mid 80s. TV channels in the Yukon at that time, this is such Mike bait. Oh my God. TV channels in the Yukon at this time came from a mishmash of places: CBC and CTV from Vancouver, CHCH from Hamilton. I don't know how that...
The great CHCH, that's my local station, home of what am I going to say, Mike?
The Frightenstein, Frightening World, hilarious.
Of Frightenstein with Billy Van and Vincent Price.
So, how did they get Hamilton all the way up there? Was it just like a huge, transmitter, or like maybe it was cable? I don't know. We'll have to ask Dominic about that.
Some kind of weird, some kind of weird atmospheric phenomena. The Aurora Borealis bouncing it off the.
Yeah, probably. ITV from Edmonton, all of the U.S. channels from Detroit. So that seems to me that's probably some kind of cable or satellite, I'm guessing.
Could be.
Anyway, so he talks about that, and then he had just listened to I Am Woman. And as we talked about urban renewal in Cincinnati, he works at the Winnipeg Arts Council in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And one of the presentations that he's put together in one of the conferences he did back in 2010 was from Donald Clinton, who oversaw the revitalization of Fountain Square in Cincinnati. Yes, the fountain that you see right there in the opening credits. And he's got a link to the presentation called Skywalks in Suburbia. And I will definitely put a link to that in the show notes for this episode. We usually do a pretty abbreviated show notes, but we'll try to just put references into everything we talk about. So, Dominic, thank you for that fascinating email. And
it's a great email. We didn't read it all. The conference that he hosted about art and artists in the city had a great name. It was called "My City's Still Breathing." And places like Cincinnati, places like
Winnipeg,
like Winnipeg, urban renewal, and they're all struggling in similar kinds of ways.
Yeah, but it's great because Cincinnati really, I mean, we talked about with Mike McElroy online, who's a Cincinnati guy. I had sent him a link about this neighborhood in Cincinnati that has kind of, gone through boom and bust and gentrification. Cincinnati, again, it just seems to be one of these signal places for all of the things we've talked about that have happened in America over the past 40 years, as far as like commercialization and racial strife and neighborhoods being, sort of like, left behind. It's a pretty fascinating topic. The built landscape is definitely something that I think a lot more historians have to pay attention to, as far as, how the built landscape affects people and social movements.
We got a wonderful, flattering email from Michael Floriani. Just very, very sweet.
Oh, yeah.
There's no question, though. But thank you, Michael, for that email.
It seems like every time we get one of these emails, people just have memories of when and where they watched WKRP, and that to me that's the gold right there. I love hearing about that.
Exactly. Well, one question that I think we can put away relatively quickly comes from friend of the podcast and two-time guest Jeff Wickstrom, who emailed us just like a few days ago to ask, if WKRP was going to be updated. Let's say it was being rebooted on Netflix in 2018. Yeah. How would we update the premise, and who might we cast? And
I feel like we talked about this.
Well, I was just going to say, Jeff is a friend of the podcast, but perhaps not the most assiduous listener to the podcast, because I'm pretty sure this goes to my hobby horse, that the most underappreciated episode of our podcast is the season end, the 2-part season ender of season 1, because I'm sure that we tackled just that. We did that question. I'm always happy to play the dream casting game, and I can imagine what I've been thinking lately about the sort of updating the. I could say something depressing like. We make it about a zany fake news clickbait site that decides to go into alt-right hate speech or something like that. But, real news. That's better than my idea. Yeah, okay.
That's way more positive. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but, if you're going to recreate it in 2018, maybe just, do a loving historic recreation a la Stranger Things or Americans. Oh. Don't update it, but just recreate 1978.
That would be pretty fantastic.
Or I was thinking that maybe it's time for maybe we got to think bigger than a Netflix show, a big budget Broadway musical, WKRP exclamation mark.
Oh, no. Okay, yeah. Well, that would be. I mean, if they were gonna, maybe they could make it into like a jukebox musical of all of the music that was going on at this time. Like, it would be like at least 30% yacht rock. I would be totally into that. So it would be perfect.
What I don't know what percent Billy Joel it would be, but
we're not going to talk about Billy Joel. I can't. I can't abide it tonight. After my thorough thrashing at the hands of Libby Cudmore in 2 different online venues. We'll link to that in the show notes as well. I want to talk about the Sears Wish Book, Rob. I want to talk about the WKRP toys and games.
Yes,
because we are toys and games guy. We what are we? Hobby equipment. We love hobby equipment.
Hobbyists. So, we're hobbyists.
Exactly. So let's talk about we've seen it pop up a few times, but RJ White from the Columbo podcast, Just One More Thing, sent us a link to a image of the WKRP turntable in the Sears Wish Book from 1982.
Yes, that's a double hit of the of memories, because the Sears Wish Book all on its own, it takes me back. And then
they used to have them all online, but they got taken down for
where is it? Whatever. I'm looking for it. I can't find it in the notes. Do you want to describe the WKRP turntable?
The WKRP turntable is fantastic. It's a working turntable. Like it's again, it's one of those inexpensive portable style turntables, but it's got these great sort of like image appliques of Jennifer and Johnny and Venus on it, and a little place where you can put your notes, and like it's just fantastic. And I feel really bad because I've gotten back into vinyl, as you know, Rob, and like after like my original 1980s buying 45s, and then in the 90s I got into buying like indie single 45s, but now I'm going back into record stores and getting stuff from this era. And I bought a little cheap turntable, but man, if I had known that this was an actual working turntable, I would have gotten one off eBay and just put that in my living room,
And then along with toys and games, we also got to mention that 1 or 2 people have tweeted us the
Oh, the big guy game.
Along with the official licensed WKRP turntable, there's also the somewhat unofficial, I'm guessing, the big guy game. And the ads feature our man Gordon Jump, and the slogan, Gordon Jump of television's WKRP invites you to play the big guy game. And it appears to be some kind of a DJ game. It says the big guy game. It looks like a board game.
Yeah.
But it says be a sports announcer, comedian, talk show host. At someone else's turn, you're the audience.
Oh man, it's a party game. It's like one of those old, sort of like get a suggestion off of a card and like act it out, basically.
I guess so. It's for ages 10 years to adult. Costs $6.99, and I guess. They're trying to do an end run around. It's not quite licensed.
It's not CBS MTM approved, is it?
No, they have Gordon Jump.
Yeah.
So they call it the big guy game. Now, I have lots of questions. I have problems. Gordon Jump, the big guy is not a DJ.
You're getting down this for accuracy's sake, huh?
Yes.
I just went on.
Exactly.
I went on Board Game Geek. All of the photos are very low resolution, which is very disappointing. So I can't see any of the text or anything like that. But it's got 6 counters. You remember those old little pawn type counters?
Okay. Yep.
And a little board that you go around, and then there's different decks of different kinds of radio shows that you can have. It's pretty wild.
Couldn't they get? I mean, was Howard Hessman too expensive to promote this game? Now, I mean, I'm always happy to give Gordon Jump work, but it seems like a natural. If you got a game about a WKRP themed DJ game,
yes,
get
one of the DJs, right?
Get a DJ.
If any of our listeners want to buy us the big guy game, I will absolutely take that graft. I don't care. I want to try this game and see what it's like.
Lastly, ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
It should be salad. Roughage is very important.
Lastly, the defendant is Italian.
Hey, I'm Italian.
That explains your vote, doesn't it? Walt?
Listen, you are both dummies. The defendant is a Canadian. Now, let's get this over with today because I don't want to look at another suit of his.
I'm the foreman.
Down, Junior. Now, everybody who wants him snuffed, lift your hands. You're the one who convinced me.
Well, I changed my mind, and I'd like spinach salad, too.
Let me stick 2 together.
Yes.
Because what these have in common is that I think they have stumped me. But
okay.
Our good friend Terry Maguire, who guested on the podcast in season 2, he writes in to ask about Mile in My Shoes, I'm sorry to say, and about he says, please forgive me for not getting a joke on WKRP, but there is one line from the episode, A Mile in My Shoes, that I have never understood. Herb says to his fellow jurors in attempt to get them to convict, hey, the defendant is Italian. This ruffles the feather of the bearded juror who says, I'm Italian.
I remember that, yeah.
Yep, and then Walter, the little immigrant man from another country, says, you're both dummies. The defendant is a Canadian. And there's a big laugh.
Yeah.
And
then that lets them kind of convict him and sentence him to die in the electric chair.
To die, right. and Terry wonders what the hell is going on.
Okay,
and,
I have a thought on this.
Oh, okay.
I actually have a.
If you have a theory, then okay.
I do have a theory.
I was just going to say that it is possible. I know this sounds like the pot calling the kettle black, but it is possible that Terry is overthinking this and that Mile in My Shoes does not reward that close a reading.
It could be another, let's get us out of the scene, I gotta go buy a car type line. But I think it's kind of meta humor in a way, because I think the fact that a hardened murderer would be Canadian is kind of funny to an American audience.
Yeah.
I think that the fact that it becomes okay for them to execute this guy because he's Canadian and then there are no Canadians in the room also helps, because again, you've got the whole, I'm Italian, I'm from another country, you know, nobody in the room is going to step up and defend Canadians. So I think there's a couple of sort of like differently angled Canadian jokes happening in this scene.
I guess so. I'm not taking offense because I'm Canadian. And in fact, Mike and I did bat this seat around a little bit when we recorded.
Yeah.
Mike being Italian American and me being Canadian. It just got, cut for time. But, yeah, I don't know. I think that,
it's a non sequitur. I think it's one of those.
It may just be a non sequitur, and we've been, very generous in the amount of thought we've dedicated to A Mile in My Shoes already. And then along the same lines, we got a email from Ken Smith, another Canadian actually, and he mentions until death do us part. Johnny goes details. This is when he's pitching Bailey on going to Jamaica with him.
Right.
Are we going to have separate rooms? Details.
Oh, yeah.
And he asks whether that is a thing, whether that line comes from something else, or if it started with WKRP, and whether when people now today say details, they are knowingly or unknowingly making a WKRP reference.
Yeah, now this does sound to me like one of these great classic TV urban legends, right? Like, oh yeah, nobody ever said that before it appeared on, Growing Pains or Family Ties or something like that. But I did try to Google Ngram this tonight, Rob. But
I did. It's hard. You can't engram something with a comma in it. Yeah.
It's very difficult because you're also going to get, I got a lot of like tables and studies where there was a word details next to the word details. You know what I mean? It didn't really work on Google Ngram. So this one, unfortunately, I think is going to have to remain unsolved, but I don't think Howard Hesseman invented details.
No, I mean, we're getting down to what is the sort of, smallest atomic unit of a joke, because it's a bit like Amazon patenting one click. Like, can details be a thing? Or, and yet Howard Hesseman just sort of improvs and pulls stuff from all over the place. So it's very plausible.
Because yada yada existed before Seinfeld. Seinfeld just made it popular. You know what I mean?
I feel like, and I just sort of, you went to Google Ngram, which is very smart. I just tried to use the search engine in my head and close my eyes.
You're so old fashioned, Rob. Sometimes I swear.
I went into my Sherlockian memory palace. And,
of course.
And I can hear in the movie theater that is my brain. I feel like I can hear Cary Grant saying details.
Yeah, that sounds right.
But it might just be a created memory.
He could have even said it on WKRP because he actually appeared in an episode of WKRP.
That's right. Details. So
wait a minute. If you were Sherlock, that makes me Watson? I don't know if that's necessarily what I want out of life. I don't want to be Sherlock either. Maybe that's the problem. Neither of those archetypes appeal to me
You could be
much.
Moriarty.
Oh, that's much better, yes. Man pulling the strings in the background. I like that. Hey, let's give a shout out to John Overholt over at Houghton Library at Harvard, because not only has he given us great questions and comments, he's gotten a ton of people into the podcast. So, John, thank you so much for being one of our boosters. But he brings up, before we even talked about it on the podcast, he brought up the story arc and the character arc thing. Talking about Herb saying in a later episode he has a drinking problem, so he won't drink. So this was before we released Nothing to Fear But. So we said we're going to keep our eye open for this in season 4. But can you think of any other examples other than sort of Johnny's family and Herb's drinking? We're going to keep an eye out for Les's communism. But are there any other sort of examples of this from the last couple of seasons?
Something we need to watch for, and I think it might have gotten clipped from our last episode of the podcast, is that the Castle book suggests that there's continuity from the fight against Dr. Bob, that because they lose all their sponsors, they have no advertisers, and that is in fact why the station starts to pick up all sorts of listeners in season 4, because season 4 does have a bit of a meta theme to to it or an arc to it, which is about the station finally becoming a hit, finally moving up in the ratings. And I can't remember if that's explained, but that's something to watch for, is whether there actually is continuity where their stand against Curb or Cure or whatever actually is what,
makes them into a commercial-free station.
Actually makes them into, and then makes them into a success. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's not, I think there were commercial-free stations that weren't public radio stations at that time. Again, they were running off kind of like the beneficence of like, donors or, sort of rich, radio networks out there that could afford to have commercial-free stations in a few markets. So it's not implausible, let's say, for it to happen.
I don't know if we've mentioned on the podcast, but you've been, we're both huge fans of the Beyond Yacht Rock podcast.
Yes.
And, they hardly need a plug from us. They're doing just fine. But it's a terrific podcast. And you have actually done some work for them. You've written for their blog. You had, you went toe-to-toe with Livy Cudmore over the great Billy Joel question. And they had an episode on
Marina Rock.
Right. This is what they do on the podcast is they create these marvelous arbitrary music genres.
Yeah.
And most famously yacht rock. And I guess you'd probably better explain it. Marina rock is like is it a little bit more blue collar?
It's blue collar yacht rock. It's like you're not quite on the boat. You're just hanging out in the marina, maybe at the bar. And this is your Rupert Holmes, like Pina Colada song, like Robbie Dupree Steal Away, kind of B-level kind of smooth music from the late 70s. Yeah.
And what did they include in that countdown of Marina Rock?
They included the theme song from WKRP in Cincinnati at their number 3 spot. Yes.
Yes.
The story behind that's so incredibly fascinating, and I don't have the guy's name in front of me. The guy who wrote the song, Carlisle.
Steve Carlisle.
Steve Carlisle.
Steve Carlisle?
Yeah, it is. So he actually was from, I guess he was working in LA, but his friends, Buckner and Garcia, authors of Pac-Man Fever.
Ooh.
Yes, this is some deep lore right here, folks. And I'm kind of stealing this from the Beyond Yacht Rock podcast, but that's okay. It's WKRP related, so it's justified. But like, what they would do is after they released the song, and it became actually a middling hit on the top 40 charts, what Carlisle and Buckner and Garcia would do is re-record the song with your local station's call letters. So, so you would be able to, be WXYZ in Buffalo, like that kind of thing.
CHTV Hamilton.
Yeah,
nice.
Exactly.
Nice.
So these guys hustled. I mean, before Pac-Man Fever became a huge hit, like in the 2 years before 1982, this is how they were kind of like making their way through the world. And I said to myself when I was listening to the episode, I'm like, and I think I even said this in an email to David Lyons of the podcast. I said, boy, this feels a lot like trying to hustle for clicks being a podcaster in the 2010s. You know what I mean? Like, just get out there and pound the pavement and try to find new listeners by just doing everything you can to bring people in and listen to your show.
And so Steve Carlisle is sitting in the studio, and they're like, "Okay, Steve, just 350 more small radio stations to go."
Yes, exactly. It's like the ferryman bit, They're just, oh, that's great.
I got a pocket full of quarters, and I'm headed to the arcade. I don't have a lot of money, but I'm bringing everything I made. I got a callus on my finger, and my shoulder's hurting too. I'm gonna eat them all up just as soon as the time do. 'Cause I got Pac-Man fever. It's driving me crazy. I got Pac-Man fever. I'm going out of my mind. I got Pac-Man fever. I'm going out of my mind.
Oh, I had one more that I wanted to talk about. We got to talk about Uncle Ned. from Family Ties, because man, we got so many responses on Twitter.
We hit a nerve, we tapped a vein, something buried in the Generation X psyche. And I think that it really is Generation X now. We often are playing on the lines between the generations, but that was something that really our fellow Xers, some buried trauma about, drunken Uncle Ned.
I know. We talked about this on the episode, I think. Tom Hanks was not the sort of huge phenomenon when he did that episode. He had done Bosom Buddies. He was very well liked, but he hadn't done a ton of movies yet. He hadn't done Big. He hadn't done any of that stuff. But still, you don't hit Michael J. Fox. You just don't do it, especially when you're 6 or 7 inches taller than him. It's just not fair. It's like Hamilton Camp versus John Matuzak. You know what I mean? You just
but it's not like Tom Hanks is threatening. He is a bigger guy, but I think that part of what is
uncanny about it.
Yeah, uncanny. I mean, first of all joking aside, those scenes,
they're really tough to watch. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was digging up the clips, they're corny and cheesy in that whole 80s sitcom way. But, there's a lot of star power there. Both of these guys, Michael J. Fox and Tom Hanks, are charismatic, lovable guys.
Yep.
And that's it. That's the thing, is that they're both such sweethearts that, to see them fight it's really, I don't like it when Mom and Dad fight. I don't like it when Alex and Uncle Ned fight. While we're actually just talking about people writing in, I forgot to include it in the notes, but speaking of drunken Uncle Ned, shout out to just a buddy of mine, Ned Codd, who has sent me a couple of great emails that I might not have even forwarded to you, Mike, but he's another friend of the podcast, so he's my drunken Uncle Ned. Hi, Ned.
Let's go to the Facebook topics, because I think we have a few things here that we want to talk about. This was great of you to put this into the notes, Rob, about our music expert listeners. We have a great contingent of people who are big fans of Hold My Order, who are also really into music. I mean, I said that, hey, Juice Newton, she was a big sensation, a 2-hit wonder in the early 80s. And boy, do I regret saying that she was a 2-hit wonder at this point, because I had...
The 2 hits would have been...
Angel of the Morning and Queen of Hearts.
Queen of Hearts.
Yes. But, God, people came out in full regalia to just correct me on this. And it turns out she had a lot more than just the 2 hits. But I mean, come on! I was 7 years old, for God's sake.
So we heard from a number of people, including some real music experts. Dan Miles, who we've mentioned before, hosts the Friends of Dan music podcast. This guy knows everything there is to know, and about music of this era. And in fact, he knows half the people. He's had them on his show. And then it was great to hear from Michael Hernandez. That's Michael Hernandez of the Spreadsheet fame, right?
Boy, I tell you, we couldn't have done this podcast without Michael Hernandez. So,
exactly.
Yeah,
he's the guy who painstakingly went through and did the spreadsheet of all the music in WKRP, including all the music that was not replaced even on the Shout DVDs. So when Dan Miles and Michael Hernandez come knocking on the door to defend Juice Newton's honor, to insist that she was in fact a 5-hit wonder, then Mike had to eat his words.
I did, yeah. But I mean, that's the thing. I really, really like her songs. I feel really bad now. It seems like I always do this. I inadvertently badmouth people I actually really like. I don't do it on purpose. This isn't like, taking the piss or, having a giggle or banter in the British sense. I just sometimes think I get too into something that I start to just kind of pick it apart. I think that's kind of what happens most of the time with this stuff.
Yeah, you just, you want to, you just don't want to be hurt, right? You just got to tear it down before anyone else does. You've been hurt before.
True. That's so true.
There was supposed to be another special guest here tonight. He couldn't make it. He won't be able to appear with us until we get to Los Angeles. Chris Cross was going to come down tonight. He couldn't do it. But no problem, because we have Brian Peters, the drum roadie, to sing. What's the name of that song? Ride Like the Wind. Brian, come on out here. This is a first. This is the first time that Brian gets to do this.
It is the night that
we should talk about Adam.
Adam, of course, my one of my oldest friends, the one who somehow connects everything back to Frank Zappa. But he pointed out that we missed a great opportunity when we were talking about talk radio. This was after Ask Jennifer.
Yes.
Is that what it was called?
Yes.
The Ask Arlene episode.
Yep.
And we were talking about talk radio, and we were talking about the movie Talk Radio. And but we didn't mention the movie The Fisher King, which of course we have a thing about The Fisher King. Listen to episode 4. I Thought Turkeys Could Fly. For all the details there. But yeah, of course, The Fisher King, which I only dimly remember, but it's this movie from the early 90s about a
Terry Gilliam,
radio shock jock. Terry Gilliam with Robin Williams, right?
Yes.
And it's about a shock jock and a sort of a homeless guy searching for the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
Right?
The plot revolves around the shock jock, impels a mass shooter to go and do a shooting. One of the victims is Robin Williams' wife. He was a professor of medieval literature, and he has a psychotic break and thinks he's one of the Knights of the Round Table. And he rides around, pretends to ride around New York City looking for the Holy Grail. It's so obvious, Adam. I can't believe we didn't see it. It's actually one of my favorite movies. It's really, really great. It gave Mercedes Ruehl a Best Supporting Actress Oscar. It's just a fantastic. It's an underrated Terry Gilliam movie.
I gotta go back to that. I think I saw it in the theater in 1990, whatever, and haven't seen it since then.
Yeah.
Well, another thing that a number of people emailed us about and wrote to us, not to let us know, but just because you share when things like this happen, is that of course we just lost Mary Tyler Moore.
Yeah,
and only a month or so after the death of her husband, Grant Tinker. Right?
Yeah, ex-husband. Yeah, I mean that's. I wrote a really long post about Grant Tinker because. A lot of times when you look at TV history and, again, me being kind of like a media studies gadfly at this point, but like when you look at TV history, it's the actors, actresses, writers, who get a lot of the attention. But I mean, when it comes to like huge names in television history, you have to put Grant Tinker up there. But here's the thing. It wasn't all him. And Mary Tyler Moore was the namesake of MTM. And Mary Tyler Moore was one of the first. I think Lucille Ball was the first sort of woman who became like a TV mogul with Desilu Productions. I mean, we wouldn't have Star Trek if it weren't for Lucille Ball. So,
and we wouldn't have WKRP without Mary Tyler Moore.
That's exactly, right. Exactly. I didn't watch the Mary Tyler Moore show a lot. I think it was one of those older shows. I didn't quite get into it that same period where I was watching things like Barney Miller and WKRP.
Yeah, but you just know that there are people, 10 years older than us for whom that show was so important.
Especially women.
Especially for women, of course. The sort of the single woman, but they said single girl
well,
back
there you
then.
go, yeah.
Just it's easy to forget how... that wasn't even respectable, that long ago. And just the kind of quiet, it was not a super political show, but the quiet revolution of this character being on TV every week and being, sort of admirable and of course, beautiful and funny,
yes,
but also smart and independent. And then that Mary herself was those things. The real life Mary Tyler Moore was those things. So, just an inspiration to so many people, so many women, and then to follow that up with her and Grant Tinker with this company that made some of the best TV of the 70s and 80s, without question.
Absolutely. Before there was Peggy Olson, there was Mary Richards. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the same sort of archetype that we're talking about here. Somebody who busts through barriers. One thing I did find really, really interesting as we talk about sort of women in the workplace and women on TV is that one of the great sort of leaps forward on the Dick Van Dyke Show, which Mary Tyler Moore got her big break on, was that she got to wear pants. Like, she was the first main woman character on American television to be allowed to wear pants. I think the producers at the beginning of the show said, well, you can wear them once every couple of episodes, but that's it. Like, we don't want people getting the wrong idea. But like, just again, stuff that we look back on 50, 60 years afterwards with just complete bafflement. I mean, these are things that she had to go through, like women, young professional women in the early 60s in New York City wore capri pants. Like, that's just a fact, and she got to reflect that fact on TV. And I think that's, again, these are things that, we just need to remember. They're very, very sort of subtle things, but they speak volumes about what was going on in society at the time.
The next morning, Herb took us to work with him.
You guys gave us quite a start yesterday, but I think things have settled back to normal now.
Say, who manages the station?
Well, there's three of us. There's Arthur Carlson, he's the GM. Andy Travis, he's the PD, and me, I'm the S&M.
Hurricane G is expected to dissipate into
SM, sales manager. That's radio jargon.
Sounds like you just about run the station.
For the 1981 senatorial race. Finally, President-elect Ronald Reagan and his wife Nancy spent the day at the Reagan Ranch.
It's a great country, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
They were joined later by Vice President to be George Bush.
We like it.
Locally.
So we've done our quick review of season 3, Rob, and we've looked at sort of how many real classic episodes there are in this season. But, as we said at the beginning of this episode, the season starts off kind of weird, with Airplane Show and Jennifer Moves, and moves through the baby and real families and all these other episodes that shake things up. And our perspective hits a nice steady ground in the middle of the season with episodes like Venus and the Man and Frog Story. But then as soon as Ronald Reagan is elected, something happens, and the sort of mood and the tone and the trajectory of the season, as we've talked about many times, kind of takes this sort of depressing downer sort of trajectory.
Do you think that Reagan is part of that? Do you think
I do.
that's...
I do. I think that one thing we haven't talked about on the podcast yet, I don't know if we put it in the show notes, but we were going to talk about the message that they recorded for the Iran hostages.
Yeah, what episode was that on? We just didn't make it for time.
Yeah, it was early in the season, obviously, because it happened right after Reagan's inauguration.
I think it might be Venus and the Man.
Yeah. So when the Iran hostages were released after the inauguration of President Reagan, after one of the episodes, the WKRP cast got together to wave flags and say "Welcome home" to the hostages.
It's actually how the episode starts. It's at
the beginning. Okay,
it's at the beginning of the episode. They're all there. It might even be the cast and crew, and they're all there in the lobby of the station.
Yeah.
And they say, welcome back to the hostages. And of course, this is a big, cathartic, important moment for Americans, but. Yeah, there's something a little bit forced about that scene, don't you think? Or I don't know if it's the distance of 20 years, but you get the impression that
35, Rob.
20. Sorry, just wishful thinking.
I know, right?
You get the impression that it's weird to see them waving the flag. It's weird
really
to see WKRP waving the flag. And Howard Hessman has the flag in his mouth, and he in particular, it's weird to see. You just get a strong vibe of what he thinks of this whole operation.
Yeah, there's a line in season 4 in the Pills episode that nobody takes speed anymore because as soon as Reagan came in, everybody started taking downers, and I think it's there. I think it's a big. I mean, think about the issues that are covered in those episodes. I mean, I would imagine a lot of them were recorded in the interregnum between Carter's leaving office and Reagan coming in, but like Ask Jennifer with the domestic violence plotline, I Am Woman with the activism plotline. I mean, what was on there? What was going on in the writer's room in late 1980, early 1981 and of course the Jerry Falwell episode. Like, that's an obvious one, but like...
And then a throwback to red baiting with Secrets of Dayton
my
Heights.
God, I mean...
And then we have Herb's alcoholism. We have the station being robbed. We have crime.
Yeah.
And Venus and the Man, too, is sort of, implicitly about gangs.
Yes.
And, even Fever and Mr. Tide is... You know, something about phoniness and selling out. And
a lot of people in this season reference the fact that it's the 80s now. We talked about it a little bit in...
that's in Till Death Do Us Part.
Yeah. So, like, I think I think a lot of the things that we're seeing as these downers and these serious issue episodes, I don't think they were a coincidence. I think they are as much a product of their time as anything could be. And I think that we know that the writers and Hugh Wilson were very conscious of social issues. It was part of their bailiwick from the very beginning. I mean, you think about Less on a Ledge, and we took it apart for all of its, again, retrograde sort of thoughts on, gay and trans people. But, I think I said this when we did the episode long, long ago. That's the second episode of WKRP to air.
Uh-huh.
And from the very beginning, this cast, crew, and writer's room are really engaged in talking about current social issues. And so what happens at the end of 1980 and the beginning of 1981, I mean, I think it's obvious. I think it has to do with the mood of the nation at the time.
Even trying to separate this from kind of just partisan scorekeeping, which is hard to do.
Yeah.
But, the mythology, what we're supposed to remember about the early 80s is morning in America. America got its groove back after the malaise of the 70s. That's the storyline, the bad 70s followed by the cheerful 80s, whatever your sort of, position on the spectrum. But 81, 82, 83, those were pretty grim times. The economy was rough.
Absolutely.
Reagan was at his most hawkish. The Cold War was right back on.
You got the Marine barracks bombing in Lebanon.
And it was kind of a hard, ugly time. It wasn't all. That's the reason people imprinted on, this lovable, befuddled grandpa president with a twinkle in his eye. But it wasn't because everything was all sunshine and roses. It was because that was a tough time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I guess this leads directly into...
Yeah, why are we having all these thoughts about how a new president comes in and it's a real tough time? So there's this funny thing that Mike and I have been noticing almost since the beginning. Mike and I are both, prone to pareidolia. Is that right? The seeing of patterns where no patterns necessarily exist.
Plate of shrimp.
Right. We see patterns between the television show WKRP and the podcast Hold My Order and our lives. We see these kind of synchronicities. And I think that this is a generational thing. I would say that, those of us Generation Xers or Reconstructionists and Revivalists, which is what Mike and I are, like going meta. We always talk about meta moments on the show. Yeah. Going meta is like our magic, right? Like we're like metamancers, we break the fourth wall. We are doing finger quotes is our somatic spell component, that everything is always
groovy.
Groovy, exactly. Like sort of, we're always in dialogue with, on the one hand, we're the mashup generation, the sampling generation. We create our culture, sort of bricolaging it out of other things. Yeah. And the question of whether it is real or fake, and the simulation and the simulacrum, these are things that, occupy our minds a lot of the time. And so we see these patterns. Give you an example. The first season of this podcast was a lot like the first season of WKRP.
Yeah.
We weren't even on iTunes.
It's amazing we weren't on iTunes. I can't even think about that.
We barely knew what we were doing. We just kind of told our friends that we had this podcast and told people to go to the easy to remember URL, holdmyorderterribledresser.com.
I still love the title, Rob. I'm not going to diss the title at this point.
No, I love the title too, but just like season 1 of WKRP had this, I think, creative spark, but also had this sort of like, you never know when the wheels are going to come off kind of feeling. That's what season 1 was like. That's what season 1 of the podcast was like for me. Then, boom, season 2. Not only do we get on iTunes, we get on New and Noteworthy.
Yeah.
And in Canada, we're like the number 1, number 2 TV podcast for like 6 weeks.
That's crazy.
And so, thank you Canadians for clicking and loving the podcast.
As I said
at
the time, a few Canadians go a much longer way.
That's right. That's right. Your clicks count more in Canada than in the vast pool of the United States. But basically, New and Noteworthy was our Tuesday nights after MASH because
Yes, it was.
because season 2 of WKRP is when they have their best time slot and their best ratings, and they just and Mike and I don't do it for the ratings. That's not really what we care about. But we couldn't help but think, life imitating art or art imitating art or what have you. But if you live by the meta, you die by the meta, and so so what we didn't foresee was that. Season 3, WKRP takes this weird, and there's side projects and things like that. And Mike had a side project and all these kinds of synchronicities. But season 3, Hugh Wilson is a little overworked. He's not feeling the comedy as much.
Yeah.
And then the show takes this dark turn. And, sometimes it felt like we had the hex on us, this fall and winter.
You're right. You don't want to mess around with magic. I mean, it's powerful. I mean, it can, as you say, it can rebound on you. And everything you've been talking about, pattern recognition, meta fiction. I mean, as you say, it's the kind of stuff our generation grooves on, but again, I don't want to get too woo on you, Rob, but this is one of these things where, if you start looking for patterns, you're going to start seeing them. And if you start seeing them, they're going to start integrating into your life. And, I think this is kind of where we want to talk about sort of one of our mutual, if there's one thing I think that the two of us are as big of fans of as WKRP, it's probably The Invisibles, I would say.
Yes. So this is the comic book The Invisibles by the great Scottish comic author Grant Morrison.
Yeah.
And Morrison wrote The Invisibles over most of the 1990s. Basically, it wrapped up right around 2000, 2001. And Morrison has written a ton of great comic books.
Sure.
He wrote the X-Men for a while. He wrote Superman and Batman. But he himself is a practicing chaos magician.
That's right.
And,
yes.
And you always got to be careful with chaos magicians in general and Morrison in particular that you can never tell when they are taking the piss.
Yes,
so
of
like,
course,
that
that's part of the paradigm. That is part of the magic.
Part of the paradigm.
Yeah.
So what he says, you believe as much of this as you want, but what he says is that The Invisibles was not just a comic book. It was kind of a magical hyper sigil designed to kind of become sentient and usher in the new millennium and the 23rd sunspot cycle and that kind of thing. And he wrote all of his occult interests into the book, but he also wrote himself into the book. He wrote himself into the book as one of the main characters. And when he started noticing synchronicities between the comic book and his life, he started to play with it. So he actually wrote girls that he wanted to meet into the comic book and then met them in real life, like girls he wanted to shag, basically.
Yeah.
He ooh, this is cool. I turned myself into this cool comic book superhero, super spy, and now I'm gonna hook up with this dream girl. And sure enough, she would show up in real life. And and he had this kind of crazy alien abduction drug trip experience in Kathmandu, and he wrote that into the comic book, and it informed a lot of the comic book.
But he also played with some very dangerous fire, right? Because
he did play with some dangerous fire, and this is what happens. There's always blowback. There's always magic has costs, and so when his character King Mob in the comic is captured by the bad guys and tortured, and they that he believes that his face is being devoured by this necrotizing fasciitis. Very soon after writing that, Morrison falls ill, kind of mysteriously ill, and is by his telling, really close to death when someone finally gets him into a hospital and correctly diagnoses that he has like a staphylococcus infection or something like that, golden staph infection. And his it's eaten away his face, and his lungs are completely filled with fluid, and he's close to death. And basically everything that he wrote, is coming back on him. The story that I read him telling somewhere is that, in his delirium, he struck a deal with the disease machine spirits that were devouring him and said, "Hey, if you let me live, I'll make you the stars of my comic book." So he's still with us, but it's a cautionary tale for would-be chaos magicians. So I guess what I'm saying is, I'm sorry that Mike and I got Donald Trump elected president of the United States.
I am also sorry we got Donald. But hey, we've got our next podcast, Rob, issue by issue, look at the Invisibles. I think we have to do it.
Ooh, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
The comic to me is real, so my interaction with the Invisibles was very literal, and for me I had to become a character in order to write about those things.
He puts himself into the comic book Invisibles as the character King Mob, this ultra-sexual, ultra-powerful avatar for Grant.
The things in the Invisibles are all based on real experiences. Made myself look like the lead character. I started to go to places he would go to and hang out with people that he would meet. Stories that are just stories. I can't relate to stories that are just somebody's making something up. I like a story that's actually meaningful, that's coming out of life or coming out of an emotion or has some weight behind it.
Yeah, so we've been talking around it, but I don't think it's going to shock any close listeners that Mike and I are a little alarmed by the outcome of the U.S. election, and a little alarmed by everything that's been happening since then. We're recording this on January 31st, 2017. And so I don't know what new craziness will have happened by the time you hear this. But we're in the middle of the fight over Trump's immigration ban, and he just fired the assistant attorney general. And, but a week ago, there was a whole different set of crazy stuff happening. Shit is coming at us very fast. And it is kind of a rough time. And without getting into our personal lives, it's not the only shit that we're dealing with right now. And so I don't know. I guess, you and I, Mike, have gone back and forth on this, and we might even feel differently about it. And we might feel differently about it at different times just based on our biorhythms and how much coffee we've had that day. But, what do you think about the relationship of this kind of whimsical, frivolous project that we have of revisiting this old sitcom in great detail in tough times, politically tough times or personally tough times?
Well, I want to take the angle on that. A few years ago, I decided that I didn't want to be enmeshed in the capitalist system anymore. I don't think at that point I was saying it in those terms, but I had been working at a certain business school and dealing with corporate clients in a corporate environment.
Everybody drink.
Yeah, well, there you go. And, the stress was really hitting my health. And a few weeks ago, a great writer, Mark Fisher, committed suicide. He's written a lot about nostalgia and pop culture and what these things have to do with how we live.
He's the hauntology guy.
Yes, he
right?
is. Yes, and
who
how
we talked about on the podcast.
We have, and how we live in a post-history neoliberal sort of environment. In one of his books, Capitalist Realism, he talks in great detail about how neoliberalism has made all of us sick, in body and in mind. Finding out that he could not deal with existence anymore a few weeks ago, really hit me hard. Because when you look up to people who create, great books about Sapphire and Steel, Doctor Who, Boards of Canada, he looked at nostalgia through this prism of, why do we recycle so much of what we once had? And it's because we don't have anything anymore under neoliberalism. We don't have anything new to look forward to, so we always look backwards.
What is the bad news we already know is that the dimension of the future has disappeared. that in some ways that we're marooned, we're trapped in the 20th century still. That what is it to be in the 21st century is to have 20th century culture on higher definition screens. Or 20th century culture distributed by high-speed internet, actually. So there's a strange, what ought to be a strange sense of repetition, of a clotted or blocked time, a time that's in many respects slowed down or flattened or retarded or gone backwards.
We talked about nostalgia and Svetlana Boym's reflective versus restorative nostalgia in last season's wrap-up, and his theories are very much linked up with that. He finds a lot positive about looking backwards, but he knows that the reason why we can't come up with new culture anymore is because it's been strangled out of us by capitalism. This is just all a big roundabout way of saying I've had people tell me that I need to keep making art right now because it helps them get through the day. And I take that kind of sentiment as, I take it really seriously, because, I deal with mental illness, and sometimes the only thing that gets me through the day is seeing a link from, one of my friends at We Are the Mutants. I posted a picture of Hugo Gernsback in his little TV goggles today.
Yes.
That made me smile. We have to keep our mental health up in this very difficult time. And, sometimes you're the party fighter and sometimes you're the party cleric. And this one thing I'm never going to be able to get used to is being the party cleric, because those of you who have told us that episode, Leonard Pierce, another great fan of ours on Twitter, said that the episode with Mandy about Venus and the Man and Frog story was incredibly important to him. And, I take this stuff seriously. We're going to, I sound like Dirk Diggler right now. We're going to keep rocking and rolling. We're going to keep going, and we're going to keep making this. And whether it means I'm, recording from Boston or Canada or the UK, depending on what happens in the next few months, we're going to keep making this podcast. We're going to take another hiatus, but we're not going to let the hiatus stop us. We're going to be back. And, I want to thank all of you for listening, and I want to thank all of you for making me feel like this is important. I really appreciate it.
Well, that's great. That's great. Yeah, it's easy to be embarrassed by, the detritus of pop culture, and to in times when you're feeling down, to feel like it doesn't matter. And, you just have to take our word for us that Mike and I both live in the real world and do what we can in the real world too. But we make our world with culture, and we connect with people with through culture. Yes. And it's our that's the Gen X thing. It's not only the Gen X thing, but this is we are we have this salvage punk culture that we strap shit together from the pull it off the garbage pile and strap it together and make it into something new, and something maybe you do free it from the capitalist system. Mm-hmm. Thinking about WKRP in particular and this somewhat downer season, I'm almost glad that the season is a little bit of a downer, because as I said, things have been a little bit rough, and we are in the middle of some fights that we don't know how they're going to end, right? And we don't know where it's going to go. And I think about episodes like I Am Woman, mm-hmm. and Clean Up Radio Everywhere, and it's really striking to me that in both those episodes, you don't see the cathartic victory. Yeah. Both episodes end on a down note, but really both episodes end on an uncertain note.
Yes.
In both episodes, and of course, our guy Arthur is at the heart of both of those, but Arthur and Bailey, are sort of, two sweethearts. They make the right choice, and they decide that they're going to fight for what is right, but we don't get to see them win. And, it may be that we're entering a period, it's too easy to think about politics as just about whether you win or not. And, it could be that we're going to be losing more than we are winning for the next little while, but that doesn't change what needs to be done, and it doesn't change the moves we got to make and the fights we got to fight. And so there's almost something, there can be something comforting and powerful in that, in seeing Arthur's going to stand up to Dr. Bob, and they're going to lose sponsors. And Bailey's going to keep sending out those petitions and keep marching. And we don't know what's going to happen to the Flim building. And but they're just going to keep doing that. And they're going to keep taking care of each other.
Yeah.
And that's kind of all we can do.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Mike. And thank all of you so much for listening. Hey, thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back soon with more WKRP riffs and memories. If you like this well enough to listen to the whole thing, tell somebody about it.
We're online at holdmyorderterribledresser.com, which, believe it or not, wasn't taken. We're also available on iTunes, and we always appreciate your iTunes subscriptions, reviews, ratings, and downloads. So get on there and give us some stars.
Good day, and may the good news be yours.
Baby, if you've ever wondered whatever became of me, I'm living on the air in Cincinnati, WKRP. I'm at WKRP in Cincinnati.